All right, Dean Coulson, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm fine. How are you doing, Matt?
Yeah, really good. We just had a little our own podcast, didn't we?
We did, yes.
I got to tell the viewers, I got to tell the listeners. We Dean thought we were recording, and he started telling me his life story. It was really good, but we're going to do that again.
It's
I was
all good.
getting so enthralled in it that I didn't want to interrupt. But so for the benefit of listeners, so wow, we go way back, don't we, buddy?
Yeah, we
In
do.
some
Yeah, long
respects.
way. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I think we first met maybe in with the man himself, Mr. Morty,
Yeah,
in Marbella, was it?
yeah. 2013, I think it was.
I think the last time did we catch up at one of the Fit Pro conventions, maybe?
Yeah, we would have. Yeah, we would have.
But that was a long time ago. So yeah, it's really always good to speak to a fellow Fit Pro. I think
Yeah.
you're maybe the second or third that's been kind enough to come on this podcast, and there's a reason for that. So congratulations, you're is it a second time author now?
Se- It's hard to say. Yeah, second time I've co-authored the Fit Formula in 2011, and I actually wrote a chapter for Michael Heppel's book 17 last year. So Michael Heppel being a best-selling author and other books. So I've done a few. I've dabbled, but this is the first one I've actually wrote myself.
Yeah, fantastic. And you did this during was it the second lockdown you started this?
It was before the second one. It was between the first and second. It was last July, and I had the opportunity to write that book masterclass with Michael Heppel, funny enough, because I was doing a lot of stuff in his free group. I was doing a lot of Wellness Wednesday live streams, and he invited me to this new thing that he'd created, and he thought I'd really sort of benefit from it. So I jumped on it, and it's been a revelation, really. It's something that I've been wanting to do, writing my own book for a long time, but I've just always had an excuse or a reason why not. But now, had more time, so let's get it done.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's just get straight into it for the benefit of the listeners. So this is Thrive,
Yes.
and this book means a lot to you, and you were giving me some of the backstory as to why.
Yeah.
Do you mind just kind of going into that a little bit, how this all came about and why you're so passionate about writing this particular book?
Absolutely. Well, for me, it's everything revolves around health. And health to me is four elements: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. They're all synergistically linked. You can't really focus on one without the other. All impact each other. And being a fit pro for a long time as well and a coach, I've seen people dabble in certain elements, hoping that that was going to be the magic pill, the magic formula, and it never has been. It always fell short. Even when I first started, it was the same thing. I did certain things and didn't understand why. So I really wrote Thrive to help people understand why they were falling short. Because I see a lot of, the world's full of a lot of dissatisfied, unfulfilled people. They're desperately searching for a way forward. And so Thrive it gives a kind of a personal account of what happens when you stop following the narrative, what everyone else follows, and these things that actually hold you back, and you start looking at what's truly possible. And that started way back when we were told we couldn't have kids. We're trying to have kids in the late 90s, early 2000s. So you try to have kids for a number of years and you think it'll be okay. It's just one of those things. And then you start thinking there's something amiss. So when the doctors did the tests, the problem was mine. Had a low sperm count. There's three things to sperm. There's numbers, there's motility and mobility. So motility is how well they function. So I had you're supposed to have about 5 million sperm at any one time. I had about 5. They didn't swim. They were all abnormal, all hunchbacks. So they didn't function. And so we were told at the time that we would never conceive naturally. That's what the medics said. So we just bought into that story, went and tried IVF, tried it twice. Both times it failed. My wife was in agony in both times and they weren't sure why, but she was in a lot of pain, but it didn't work. So it was a harrowing time where we did a lot of soul searching there. Still remember very clearly. But I'm kind of a stubborn kind of guy and I always look at what's possible. I always believe there's a way. So I started looking at different things. So first thing was I started buying some nutrition books. I bought a lot of books by a guy called Pat Holford. I read all of his books, but I started buying other books. Went to see a nutritionist locally who blew our minds because what I thought was health, like skim milk, brown bread, and all the usual stuff that we get fed, it was just obviously not true. I found out that I was lactose intolerant, something that, you know, a lot of people are aware of now, but back in the early 2000s, no one was aware of that kind of stuff. I'd had 2 operations in my late teens about this, because I just had a blocked nose all the time, just excess all the time. And then when I went to see that nutritionist, she said, well, you've got inflammation because you're lactose intolerant for a start. And then she told me that, you know, you're eating a lot of wheat, because you do. You eat, you know, sandwiches, you eat pasta, you eat a Bix, whatever you're doing. You should be eating it maybe once a week. And I was eating it like 3 or 4 times a day. It was like, how am I going to do this? But I persevered. We found a health food shop locally-ish who kind of provided what we needed. And then we found a book called, I forget what it's called. We're curing infertility naturally. I think it was something like that, by Dr. Marilyn Glenville. And she actually did consultations. She had a team. So we contacted them. We did tests with them, found, you know, different things. We put on a supplement program, not just supplements, but like herbal stuff as well, like tinctures with different things. And 3 months after we had those supplements, got the tinctures, and like we're taking them religiously, we'd stop drinking, you know, we changed our nutrition, you know, got rid of all the things that affected us, like the wheat, like the dairy. Joy pregnant after 3 months. And 3 months is the maturation time for us.
3 months she fell pregnant.
Yeah, 3 months.
After that protocol.
Yeah, after that.
Amazing. Protocol. And so how, if you don't mind me asking, how long were you trying before that point?
5 years.
Wow.
5 years. That's including the failed IVF attempts. So it took a long time.
2 or 3 failed.
2.
2 failed IVF attempts. That's transformational, isn't it, in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like there's no doubt. You know, when you get proof, it's like there's no other way that was possible. There's no other way, because what we were doing. And it was just by chance as well. We were both late for work, and it was that time, and we nearly didn't try, but we did. And that's
meant
how
to be.
And it was meant to be. And she conceived, and we were actually considering a third. We'd frozen some embryos, and we're considering doing a third IVF. So she just started some of the procedure for that, and we thought she must have felt, I can't remember the story, but she felt that she felt like she was pregnant. She felt something had changed, so she got a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And then she bought another one because she didn't believe the first one. And then we rang the clinic, because of that, these drugs, are they giving false positives? She says, no, it's not true. She said, come to the clinic on Monday, and we went, and she was 7 weeks pregnant. And so it was an amazing.
It's funny, isn't it, how, because I'm guessing you were quite, you know, you were a fit pro at this point, right?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, right. Interesting.
No, I wasn't. This is what started it all. I was actually an IT consultant. I had my own IT business, and I used to contract my services. So it wasn't until 2010 when I made the switch. So this is when you found the power of nutrition and health. Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of training anyway. I was always training, always running, lifting weights. I was a martial artist, been a martial artist for a long time, since I was 15. But this was something else. This was kind of, wow, this is really powerful. Because my mom was ill when I was she still is, but like in my teens, I remember like being frustrated that my mom wasn't there for me, but I couldn't help her either. I had that kind of, you know, guilt around that. And then, of course, this thing with Joy and not being very pregnant. So it kind of really aligned me. I thought, hold on, I'm here for more than what I'm doing. I was always reading nutrition books anyway, or training books, or things like that. I was never focused on the IT aspect so much. And so
it's always so, I always find it so interesting. And it always reminds me of how important it is to really work on staying open-minded, you know, and because one of the things that I've learned from doing this podcast for 18 months now is, you know, so many of the people that have, you know, found the power of mindset, nutrition, fitness, often it's because they've had a massive challenge. Yes. But when they faced that challenge, they had the open-mindedness to search for solutions and not just settle for the sort of mediocre narrative around, well, you can't do this, or whatever's normal is actually, you know, actually saying, well, okay, it might be normal, but does that mean that it's not possible?
Yes, exactly. I absolutely agree.
And that's what this book is about, right? Thrive is about not listening to normalized narrative and not allowing that to hold you back and actually searching for ways forward.
Yeah, I mean, the whole underlying theme of the book is, am I safe? Because whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously, our brain's constantly checking to see if we're safe in our world. And then it creates a worldview based on those parameters. So if we've had any kind of emotional overwhelming experiences or traumas when we're younger, that's an emotional pain. That's not safe. So the brain creates a story or belief to take you away from that. So anytime you encounter a situation or circumstance where that gets triggered, you automatically go and do that thing. And most people not question it because it's a belief and you always go out your way to prove a belief true. But if you're open-minded enough and it's not serving you, then you can actually kind of look in a different way. And I've got a great example. My son, he's nearly 17 now, you know, but from an early age, he was very scared of dogs. Now, that has manifested the fact that he doesn't like going for walks, doesn't like going, especially not in the beach or beside rivers where he unconsciously knows there's dogs, but he doesn't talk about the dogs anymore. He just says, I don't like the beach. But I know because of it's an emotional pain, he's moving away. That's the story his brain tells him, so he'll not feel scared. Because it was when he was, I think it was a 3 toddler next door, had a Labrador, soft as clots, came up, knocked him on his bum, trying to lick him, but a big scary monster when you're 3, seeing this dog, and after that, he had a very big phobia of dogs. I mean, to the fact even when he was 12, 13, he used to jump on my arms.
Wow.
Close. He was very scared.
Yeah.
Now he's buried that because he's older, but it's still there. And I've been helping him with that. But being a teenager, he's not interested.
It's funny. I got bitten by a dog when I was about 5, 6, maybe 7. Quite bad. Had to go to hospital. Quite bad, and it stayed with me to this day. But I've worked on it, and I've just been away on holiday, and you just remind me, I was running along the beach, and there was some people just have the dogs off their lead, and this one big dog was off its lead, and I was like, I'm not running towards that. So I just ran up the bank and along, and actually I'm pretty good with dogs these days, but it's still there. Like it's still
there. So there's a blocked energy around that still. It's still in there waiting to come out. And
it is, but I do have a belief around that, which is that you can't trust animals completely. And I believe that to be true still. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting one. So tell me about, what's the key message, I suppose, that obviously, am I safe?
Yeah.
So explain that in more detail to the listener. What are the key lessons that this premise can be sort of shared?
Okay. So the whole idea of the book is for people who have had enough of just surviving. A lot of people are just surviving this world. And there's a hierarchy of needs that a guy called Maslow created, and I've kind of taken that and changed that somewhat. And of course, the foundational needs for that are survival, which is like food, shelter, water, sex, that type of stuff. And once that need's met, the next one's a safe. But safety can be physically, not crossing the road when there's a vehicle coming, for example. Emotionally, what do I feel that's unsafe that I keep saying? Mentally, there's these different things that we get to check in constantly. That's what our brain's looking at. So we get stuck in survival. So maybe we want to aspire to be more. Maybe, we want to feel part of something, or we have self-esteem goals, or we have goals where we want to achieve something big. But if we don't create this foundation of feeling safe, or being able to understand when we don't feel safe and what to do, like having tools and resources to help process that stuff, that we might get there sometimes, but as soon as some event or circumstance happens that might trigger us and make us feel unsafe, then we'll end up straight back there. So we're almost like, that's like yo-yo dying, for example. It's the easiest, that everyone will relate to. So for me, it's like the whole premise of Thrive is really to show people like what's possible. So share my story, which I just have. And then a lot of people had enough of surviving. They want more from life, more than they've experienced, but they just can't see a way forward. So this is what Thrive's about, is to show people how to live an exciting, kind of wondrous life, but need help to achieve it. And that's what the book's about.
Nice. So, yeah, I guess you probably observed, same as me as a coach for so many years, is people aren't aware of the fact that it's, in some respects, because of like the neuroscience of like threat, like you people can, without realizing it, be more comfortable with staying in a suffering mode.
Yes, because it's known,
because there's certainty around it.
Exactly.
So, you can kind of not be happy about something, but because you still have the certainty around it and you understand it really well, you can just live with that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what so many people do. They absolutely do. And as you said,
Thrive is about saying, well, let's gain some self-awareness around why that is, and let's move forwards, and let's not settle for suffering, even if it's a low level.
Yeah.
What stops people from doing that then, Dean?
From thriving? Again, it's a failure to predict a response in neuroscience terms. When the brain, that's where anxiety comes from. The fact that anxiety is constantly looking to a future event that hasn't happened yet and stressing about it because the brain cannot create a response to that. It can't predict being safe in that environment because we don't know. And humans are really good at projecting forwards, usually from experiences from the past. They go from the past, grab it, and project forwards instead of being in the present. There's no, very few people stay present for very long. And so because they can't do that, we're constantly in this state of, I'm unsafe, I feel danger. And because of that, we just don't live in the creative, logical part of our brain, that neocortex. There's three parts of the brain. We've got the reptilian brain, the fight or flight response. We've got the emotional brain, the limbic system, which is where the amygdala is, which is what creates anxiety. And, it always checks our environment, when it comes up, like signals come up through the spinal cord. It's constantly saying, am I safe? Am I safe? Yes. Okay. You can access the thinking part of the brain, the human brain, the creative brain, the one that's curious and doing a lot of things. But any time that we don't feel safe, then that just gets shut off and we're going to react and do what we did the last time, whatever that is, whether that could be gambling, drugs, alcohol, food, whatever thing is we've built that attachment to.
And in your book, I'm guessing, do you have like a set of steps to help people start to learn how they can better create or be able to predict a better sort of response?
Yes. So really the whole book sort of covers different areas. The first one is actually, the whole first part is about triggering people, to wake people up. So they'll absolutely know whether that book's for them or not. I'm not trying to sugarcoat things. The first part is actually labeled, "It's all your fault." That's the first thing, because I want people to wake up and I want people to be triggered and say, "Oh, why is that?" And some people are not like that. I
really like that. I love that chapter name. It's all your fault.
Yeah.
Because it's a tough love title, right? It's it's getting people to tell the truth, which, let's face it, it's hard to do that.
It's very hard to do. It's easy to hide away. It's easy not to feel shame or judgment or guilt around something. So we'd rather blame than take responsibility. But unless, we've got to take our power back. If we blame, we're giving power to someone else. And why would we do that? Why would we give someone else that power when we can take it back and take control? But so many people do it. So many people do it. So that's the first part. It's just sort of wake up. This is where we are. And then I go through the physical stuff. And even like talking about movement, I don't talk about exercise and training. You can go and Google and find a million workouts. It's really about saying, okay, this is why you can't do what you do. Again, it's, am I safe? I can't do this movement safely. Your brain's not going to allow you. But if you force it, you're going to break. So it's kind of that kind of stuff. But then giving them the sort of the blueprint, if you like, of this is what you do. If you're going to do an exercise program, this is the type of things you've got to check out first. That could be a movement screen, like a FMS, functional movement screen, for those who don't know. Forget that, we can talk in those kind of things, but so it's some kind of movement screen where that tells you where your body is stable. And if your body's stable, you'll have more mobility. If your body's unstable, it'll lock things down. And then that's when people force it, when they go to these mass, training boot camps and all that kind of stuff. I'm not tying them all with the same brush, but if people are getting pushed straight off, then they're going to be in trouble, because so many people are used to sitting down. I watch people in the street, when I'm driving along, I'll see people running. I can see what their problems are just by looking at their running gait, because they sit down a lot because they don't know how to flex. They don't know how to lift their knees, so they're flicking their heels out to the side. It's sort of right, making people aware. Awareness is always a thing to achieve, like, to proceed change, and then this is what you do about it to move forwards. The same with nutrition, just very basic principles, not giving diets or anything like that. It's just this is health focused. You've got to give your body what it needs. It's not rocket science, but people get stuck on that stuff.
Yeah. And going back to, the prediction response, and being able to think logically.
Yeah.
So obviously we're both from the Dax Moy mold, and we had Dax on the podcast. Actually, it was, I think, our longest episode, nearly 3 hours long. That was good fun.
I bet.
But one of the Dax's strategies that I loved was on environments and how environments really shape our mindset and our behaviors. And do you want to talk a little bit about how important it is to be aware of your daily environments?
Absolutely. So environment, really, it could be, it's not just about the air you breathe and all that kind of stuff, but it's a factor. But it's also, who you spend the most time with its family members, colleagues, where you spend the most time with. Is it a job? Is it a toxic environment? Is it a great environment? We've got to constantly check where our energy is at, because we always know when energy's up or energy's down. So we feel whether it's light or heavy. And so from an environment perspective, we can absolutely look at that, but then we can take that a bit closer to home, because sometimes, we can have things in our environment that unconsciously trigger us, some things unsafe. I've worked with different people for different reasons. We worked with somebody last year who she was really struggling with her weight and she couldn't understand why. And that was to do with her ex-husband, and the fact that she still had things in her house from her ex-husband that she obviously just kept because they were useful, but unconsciously they were a reminder, and that made her feel unsafe. So she kept reacting and kept eating the food and kept doing the things, even though consciously she wanted to change. Unconsciously, that's not what that belief was. She wasn't in alignment with what she said she wanted and what she believed she could have. And so it's really, really important to, clear your environment out. I know Dak will have talked about the same thing. The fact that you make sure that in your environment, there's only things in there that feels energetically good, feels light. And that could be from picture frames, that could be, decluttering your own wardrobes. It could be anything. We cling on to so many things for a variety of reasons, but sometimes that's that comfort blanket, and it's not always the good thing. And if we look at it from a health perspective and maybe nutrition, I always say that genetics loads the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger, and it depends on the environment we've got. So, that the environment, it comes down to epigenetics as well. I don't know if you know much about epigenetics.
We didn't actually cover much on environments.
Yeah. But it's like epigenetics, really, it's about how you can sort of influence and change your DNA with the environment you're in. So if you're in a stressful environment all the time, that's going to change how we behave. It's going to change how we feel, because stress is toxic. It's caustic to the body. It's like cortisol, so it's unresolved. It has all kinds of effects. From a stressful thing, being in a fight or flight response all the time. So we don't digest food properly because that response takes blood away from the stomach, ready to run or fight. So it takes it to the extremities. So there's so many things that we don't consider. Even watching the TV, eating. If you're watching an action film, that's a stress response. Whether it's excitement or not, you're still getting that stress response. And so you'll not be able to digest the food and get the nutrients from the food that you think you're getting. It's just like being aware, really.
Yeah. That's the theme that always runs back on this podcast is self-awareness. It always comes back to the magical self-awareness. On the environment front, that one of the questions that Dax always says to ask is around joy. Like that's his sort of key transformation word, isn't it? Like how could this environment bring me more joy? If you walk into one of your rooms in your house, and like you said, if it's full of clutter and that brings you joy, then great. If not, then maybe declutter it. And that's I think that's a really good one. It's just a real simple thing to do, just going through your daily life, isn't it? Like, even at the end of the day, what could have brought me more joy today? What would have made things move the dial slightly better? Just such a simple thing, but
absolutely agree. And I think that's the first step. The next step is clearing out any kind of energetic connections. So for example, the difference between minimalism and decluttering. Decluttering is getting rid of it. You might have an office that's full of rubbish or a wardrobe's full of clothes. That's decluttering. But if you don't deal with the reason why it was a clutter in the first place, you will clutter that back up. Minimalism is different. Can't even say it. Minimalism is the fact that you deal with whatever energy's in there, why you have that stuff in the first place, why you collect clothes, why do you do this? It might be to do with a dopamine response, because obviously that's that sort of pleasure cycle that we get into. We just want to feel something, so we go and do something which has like a temporary high, but then it fades because that's not the real thing. It's not joy.
That's really interesting, because with that approach first, the minimalism approach first, you're getting to the root of a behavior issue, right?
Yeah.
And like, obviously for you and me, we work with a lot of people that one of their key goals is that they want to work on their health. They want to lose weight. And you could start with a let's start eating clean approach, which, lots of trainers go for, but which is fair enough. Like, obviously we're not saying people don't eat good food, but the question, the better question maybe is, well, what's the behavior driving you to constantly order that takeaway each week, or have those beers or those wines every night, or whatever the thing is that's really holding them back? Because no matter how much clean eating they start doing, if they're probably going to return back to old diet patterns, unless they actually address the key behavior and maybe the environment that's actually driving them towards that behavior.
Absolutely possible. Because if there's anything that triggers you in the environment, when I say trigger, I mean any kind of stress response. We might not even be aware of that stress response. It might just be something, because we don't think, oh, I'm stressed, oh, I'm going to do that instead. It's just an instant reaction, because that's how the brain works. It takes you away from it immediately. But that's where, sometimes I find if we have some kind of stress or trigger, and it might be from an emotional perspective, I'll talk more about the emotional stuff in a minute, it creates some form of pain. We have some form of pain. I released something this week, then I realized I've been in pain for a long time about this, and I didn't even realize it was just the way it was. I didn't even consider it. And I'm aware of stuff going on in my body. I work on myself all the time, as well as my clients. But I think pain is the root cause of a lot of behavior, because we'll just react and what I do because we don't want to be in that pain. And emotional pain, as I said earlier, is always the worst. I'd rather be punched in the face than deal with emotional pain, because some emotional pain really sucks. It does. And so people don't want to face that. So that's where we have this behavior of distraction, move away from pain as quickly as possible. It's part of the survival response. But we see a survival response is more physical altercations, for example, maybe more than just having something that's within us that we're not looking at, because we're so distracted externally. Our environment, it's definitely a fact that we look at, but we've got to consider our internal environment as well as the external. And I think a lot of people don't go that far. And for me,
can you just to pick up on that, because people might not always. So obviously we've been talking mainly about external environment so far, but just touch on the importance of working on the self-awareness of your internal environment. What do you mean by that, Dean?
Okay, so we're talking about the emotional realm here now. So any kind of emotional pain is the emotional realm, and it doesn't have words. It's got feelings and sensations. And we don't like to feel a certain way. I don't like to feel like that. And we'll do something else, whether that's to make us forget, when that comes in the alcohol realm or whatever else, or it might just be the fact that you might do the running, the fight or flight, might just go and run and do something, might go somewhere else just to be away from that environment. But the internal environment's always there. You can't run away from it. Well, most people will label it as fear, for example. And fear is a biological response to fight or flight, but we label it for so many other things. I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that. But it's not really, it's the fact that we're not willing or not able to look at what's going on inside. So from an emotional perspective, any kind of overwhelming emotional trauma, for example, a lot of them happen from when we're really young, because we're very emotional beings, especially when we're young, when we're trying to make sense of the world. And we can sometimes label that wrong when we have some overwhelming experience. And that's usually when that, like, an energy kind of blocks. So we'll not grow anymore energetically, because there's something painful there. And I talk about it, if you think about like a splinter, when you get a splint on your finger and it's really painful for a while, if you don't get it out, the kind of pain fades, but every now and then you'll just catch the exact spot. And
that's a great analogy. Yeah.
So emotional splinters, that's what we think of. So an emotional splinter, something that happens that's emotional, we don't deal with it, we don't fully process it at the time. So it's then repressed, suppressed. But then energy is meant to move. Emotion, energy and motion. I like that kind of thing as well. And so it'll always find its way out somehow, where that might be some kind of outburst. You might get angry quick, you might have a lot of rage. You might have some kind of physical symptoms or some kind of illness that comes up because your body wants to process something and we're not looking at it. And a lot of people don't know how to do that, and that's totally fine. But like the language of the emotional system is feelings and sensations. So we get to stop, and we get to, instead of project out and react when certain things happen, we get to stop, we get to pause. Pausing and breathing is massively, massively powerful, and a lot of people don't do it. But if we can do that and just stop and just feel.
Why is that so important, Dean? What does that do, like, specifically? What's the science behind that?
Because it breaks the cycle of reaction, because we fired and wired certain events to take us away from an unsafe or stressful or threatening environment. But stress and threat can be an emotional event as well. So physical, emotional pain, that's the thing as well. So by pausing, instead of reacting, we can actually stop. And yes, we can respond differently. That's an easy way to say it, a simplified way of saying it. But we can stop and say, where am I feeling this right now? Because there's certain places in the body can represent certain things. For example, stomach. A lot of people feel yucky in the stomach. That could be labeled as anxiety, for example. But usually when we have energy blocked and have sensations that don't feel nice in the stomach, really that's all about shame. And a lot of people hold a lot of shame there. Things like heart space in the chest, sensations and feelings there, it's usually some form of rejection. Throat can be guilt, can be not felt like they've been heard, feel like they can't like express who they are. So there's a lot of different things that are attached to different parts of the body. And what I do now is part of my coaching process, because I recognize emotional pain is the thing that just triggers everything. You can have the best diet in the world, you can move more, you can be aware of, like anxiety and worry and all that kind of stuff. But if you've got emotional pain that you have, that's unresolved, that takes control. That's the thing that we'll ultimately move away from, because that's the worst kind of pain that we don't know how to deal with that, because we don't sit with the feeling because it feels horrible.
Yeah, I guess the reason why it's such a undervalued strategy, like work on the emotional health. Like you mentioned, like the 4 components of health earlier,
yeah,
is because I guess that there's less tangible metrics for it. Like, with physical health, you've got your scales, you've got your body fat machines, you've got your fancy heart rate monitors. How do you measure a feeling? And this is obviously, I suppose, we will be able to do that because modern technology is just, with hormonal markers but it's less recognized. It's one of those things that like a bit like, like meditation and breath work 10 years ago was regarded as woo woo.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And now it's a treatment therapy. It's even acupuncture and these kinds of things 20 years ago were thought as, just kind of out pie in the sky. They didn't know why they worked, but they knew they worked.
Yes. Yeah.
And the stuff that you're talking about is, in terms of coaching, is a bit kind of similar to that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. You can measure it because you can clear these feelings, because these feelings are attached to emotions that we haven't cleared. So by allowing ourselves to sit with them in a certain way, allow them to resolve, to dissolve, to clear, whatever you want, whatever label you want to give, and then making sure that there's no connection. So if you imagine if we've got an emotional pain that we've moved away from, we've created a belief and a story that we immediately go to take us away from that. And if we resolve the emotional pain, then we don't need these beliefs or stories anymore. The brain kind of lets them go and processes them out. And sometimes it depends on the person. When I'm helping people release these emotions, it's counterintuitive, because when we feel something that doesn't feel nice, we want to move away from it. And by actually sitting with this, you could say sitting with fear, sitting with whatever this uncomfortable sensation is, you allow it to be fully felt and processed. It's almost like it's allowed to be heard. And some people deal with that and they just feel lighter because they don't feel like the weight of the world. there's some people actually realize that, you know, they've had the story, and the real reason why they've used the story wasn't anything to do with that. I was coaching a guy last year who was drinking a lot, and I said, well, tell me more about that. And he said, okay, well, it's the last time I saw my dad. He says we used to go, so it was a happy time. He used to go to the pub with his dad and have a drink. I said, okay, where's your dad? He says, oh, he's no longer with us. I says, well, what happened there? And then he told us about he sort of got dementia, and then he became homeless, and there was this whole narrative of the fact that the actual alcohol was that connection to his dad. He'd lost his dad, and he hadn't been able to fully resolve the grief from losing his dad, and he just broke down in tears. But it was a massive, for me, that's a good thing. That's just a huge energy release. That's one way of releasing energy. And, you know, it's just.
And he probably hadn't realized that connection until you coach him through it.
No, not until we found the sensation, because usually you have a talk and then I can tell when I'm looking at people, oh, where are you feeling that right now? Because people aren't even aware that there'll be something going on, but it's just a thing. But I can always see in people's faces when, you know, they glaze over, or there's a twitch, or they start shifting uncomfortably. There's something going on. And so I'll say, okay, what's going on with the body? Can you feel something right now? Yeah, where are you feeling that? Right, okay, we're going to sit with this. And I'll hold a safe space for them to do that. And then usually these kind of stories and images just come out by resolving these things. I was working with another guy last year who's a CEO, and he said he was a great work, but he always loved work, not so much at home. And he always used to preach like wellness and everything to his staff, but he was never doing it. And I thought, okay, and so we explored this. And I said, okay, so tell me more about work. Why is this so important? I said, okay. And then we got to the point where I felt that there was something in his past. I always kind of get a feeling. And so I started talking about, so what about your teens? What happened in your teens? And he was telling us a story about, he had an older brother they were both sporty, but his brother was more sporty. He was always better. And his dad always favored his brother. And so his hard working his whole life was driven for the fact he wanted to prove himself to his dad. It just fell out. It just came straight. He just realized that's why I'm driven. That's why I do what I'm doing. That's why I don't look after myself, because I haven't got time to do that, because I've got the story. I have to prove myself to my father. He wasn't even aware of it. And it's just like being able to release that energy, because there's so much energy tied up in that. And being able to release energy, then they're more able to then deal with home stuff and, you know, relationship stuff and the health or whatever else it is.
So do you believe that most of the challenges that people have, they somehow relate back to some kind of story?
Most people, yes. Most people we have, you know, between the age of 0 and 7, we're the most susceptible. We're just like storing stuff on hard drive blankly. It's just, you know, there's no question. We haven't got that kind of processing. We just accept everything. So our biggest influences are usually our parents, grandparents, teachers, whatever that is. So if you have some kind of overwhelming emotional experience or trauma, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It was just overwhelming for you at that time, and it was too much for you to deal with, then you wouldn't deal with it. Or your parents might tell you not to deal with it, stop crying, or whatever happens. And if, you know, that might be a thing, might not be a thing, it can be explored. It's not about dealing up and dredging your past. So I do believe that, you know, if you have that kind of belief or that trauma from your past and you just keep talking about it, you're reliving it, and it's as if it's just happening. For me, it's more just looking for what the triggers are so we can clear them, so there's no attachment anymore.
Yeah, you can understand why people struggle with this stuff, because to challenge your beliefs, I mean, if you're 30, 40, 50 years of age or more, to actually stop and sit down and challenge the beliefs that you've held all of your life and question them and ask yourself the big questions around them, that takes an enormous amount of courage. I remember doing Dax's course, and he sort of set ourselves the task of doing it, and at first, you know, I just didn't quite get it. I was like, well, why would I challenge my belief around money or my belief around relationships? That's surely what I think is just what I think, and that's to be true. And then you start to explore it, and you think, oh, why do I think that? Why is that my thoughts around this and that? And, you know, once you go on that journey, then I think most people end up that is not the end of the journey then, because that's when you start the journey of personal development, because it's a constant question of, well, why do I believe this now? And
yeah, and I think there's a big distinction here, which you've just reminded me of. This isn't about thinking. This is about feeling. There's a whole thought feeling loop, and we always think that it's thoughts first, then it leads to feelings, but it's not. It's the other way around. The initial thing that might pass into your head, you can pass as a thought, but as soon as there's any kind of emotional trigger, that thinking part of your brain switched off, and will automatically play the beliefs. By looking at the emotions and help resolve the emotions, we don't need to know why. Yes, sometimes you have to explore that to find where the triggers are, but we don't need to know why. I struggled with this when I first started working with this. So it's like I wanted to know why this was. Why? But it doesn't matter. There's a sensation there, then we clear it. Then any beliefs we had to take us away from that sensation, that emotional pain, will just go anyway. We don't need to deal with those thoughts or those beliefs because they'll be gone anyway. It's like with Sam, my son. Once he's ready to like resolve the stuff about the dogs, for example, then that'll just go, and then he'll just not think about dogs anymore. He'll not have that all dogs are going to eat me type of belief. The belief will just go because there's no attachment, there's no emotional attachment driving that anymore. So we can get so hung up and be stuck in here, but really it's more about being in, from the heart, like the intuition, the emotional aspect stuff. Because as I said at the beginning, as soon as anything is triggered, the thing part of the brain is switched off. We go straight in the limbic system, in the amygdala, which is the gland that controls the anxiety and protecting us at all times and keeping us safe. And so it's the feeling level we get to look at, and that was the biggest missing link for me. Yeah. It's just put everything else together, the physical, the mental, the spiritual stuff. As soon as I've like worked that out and realized how that works and how powerful it was.
And obviously that a lot of that, comes back to the self-awareness work. And have you got any sort of top strategies that you practice yourself, or you practice in your coaching practice around working on that? Is it whether it's breath work, meditation, journaling?
Yeah, I do all of that. Meditation, massively powerful. I think a lot of people get confused with meditation. They think that meditation is all about clearing your thought, like your mind of all thoughts, which is impossible. You have about 25,000 a day. It's not. It's about, as Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, it's about observing thoughts and not attaching to. And the meditation is the practice of the detachment of thought, the observation of thought over the engagement of thought. And I think that's massively powerful.
Say that again, Dean, just for the listener, because I think that was really quite profound what you just said there, if you can remember it.
I'll try and remember what I just said. So it's more about the detachment of thought, or the observation of thought, more than engagement of thought. And the more we can practice that through meditation, the more we can then not project out and react. We're detaching from that.
That's absolutely huge, because it gives you the opportunity to be an observer of you, right?
Yes.
And you're almost stepping out of your body and saying, okay, what's this guy talking about?
Absolutely that. And it's, and a lot of energy healers do that. They actually show you how to step outside of your body. So your energy is internal, for example, but they get you to go out of the body and do this because, for example, just pop my mind, the heart, for example, actually emits energy way beyond our bodies. And so we're absolutely capable of doing that, but we're so stuck in the body. And there's a lot of people who don't believe meditation or spirituality because they get confused with religion and all that kind of stuff. It's just people don't even consider the fact that we can actually step away and like sort of go beyond. And it's a hard practice, don't get me wrong. It's something I'm still working on, but I know it's absolutely true because I've seen the proof of it. And you know that when you get that certainty of stuff, and how powerful it is. But I think meditation definitely, breath work definitely, because remember, if we don't breathe, we're dead. I always laugh because there's a chapter in the book about breathing, obviously, because it's like you can't. People laugh at me when they say you don't breathe, or you can't breathe. So I can't breathe, I'm alive. Yeah, I get that, but you're not breathing correctly to energize your body, to put yourself in a calm, centered place, to be sort of in the eye wall of the storm, when all the chaos of the storm's around you. That's again being the observer, just being in that eye wall, in that calm center of a hurricane, when all that chaos and drama and everything's going around, you get to bring your attention back to your center and detach from it. And as I said,
it's funny, isn't it? Like when you think about all of the performance factors, whether it's your physical performance, how fast can I run, how much weight can I lift, what's good food, what's bad food, but no one talks about how you're performing with your breath. And the breath, let's face it, what have we got without our breath? Like, why wouldn't that be something that we should maybe focus a little bit more on?
I mean, the three fundamentals obviously are breath, water, food. Because when my son used to come in, I need this, I need that. I said, Sam, there's only three things we need. And you know us now when I say it. Okay, breath, water, food. We always used to say that because it's true. Well, where are we without that? We can last for a few minutes without breathing, or longer if you've practiced breathing, like long, holding the breath, and then hydration. That's, a couple of days max, 2-3 days. And then food, obviously 2 or 3 weeks, give or take. These are the kind of orders of what we've got to consider. So breath work is absolutely crucial, and not just breathing like we breathe. A lot of people are chest breathers, so it's a stressful way, but breathing, in a controlled manner. So we take control of that, so it serves us, not the other way around.
Yeah, and diaphragmatically breathing.
Yeah, diaphragmatically from the belly. That's what the diaphragm's for, because when you use that properly, then it also creates support and structure for the other body, like lumbar spine. If your diaphragm's working properly, you're breathing properly, that provides support for your spine. So, a lot of people who don't breathe right have back issues because the diaphragm's not working. And yes, you can, and there's a number of ways where you can check that and get it working and all that kind of stuff.
It's been really great talking to you, Dean, about all of this stuff. This was what I've been living and breathing all these years. I'm really, really proud of you for your book. So fantastic work, and good luck. People listening need to buy the book so you can get a deep dive of how to thrive. You like that?
Well, very good. I'm going to use that.
So we'll put the links, in the show notes for people to find out more, and so they can actually learn how to thrive. But where is there anywhere particular we can send people to go and find out more about you, your coaching services, your book?
Website's called theleanwarrior.com. And that's where the book is. At the minute, I'm pre-selling. I'm pre-launching a hardback book. I wanted to get it out in hardback first. So launch of the book's the 22nd of July this year. There's going to be a launch party and everything. And so I'm actually printing hard copies, first edition signed hard copies of that book, which I'll not doing hardbacks after that. I'll probably go on Amazon at some point and Kindle. But I just wanted to do that. And also for everybody who buys a copy, obviously you get a discount for doing it, but everyone who does it, I'll be doing like a Zoom Q&A talking about the book, answering everyone's questions for anyone who buys the hard
nice
before it goes on sale for everyone else.
Fantastic. Sounds great. Yeah. Well, Dean, is there any last words of wisdom for our listeners? Any mastering you tips to thrive?
Really, what we've got to do is for me, it's all about self-mastery. It's all about taking your power back. So it's bringing awareness, taking personal responsibility. Once you're aware that, you may be blaming others, anything and everything. So taking that power back, and then taking action out of faith. A lot of people jump from awareness to action. So that's the usual January crowd and New Year's resolutions. It's like, okay, I'm aware that I'm overweight. I'll go and try and lose weight, and I'll keep doing the same thing I did for years and years. But taking personal responsibility is the missing link. Saying, okay, this is all my fault. I've got to take a brutal self-inventory of what I'm not doing right, and then doing tangible things to change that. That is the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, you probably was it Jocko Willink's book? What's the name of that book?
I read it ages ago.
It's a brilliant book anyway, listeners.
Yes, yeah. He talks about extreme ownership, doesn't he?
Extreme Ownership, that's the name of the book. Yeah. That was a really, it's one of those things that everyone knows, but because of how difficult it is. I mean, let's face it, there's no, well, maybe not no, but it's got to be one of the most courageous things to do is to take ownership of
Absolutely.
of all of your bullshit.
Absolutely. Because a lot of people don't like to feel vulnerable.
And your flaws, you know,
Yeah,
taking ownership of those and just saying, yeah, you know, and taking personal responsibility for your situation.
Yes. What if you can have the courage to do that, and you can only build courage by doing it. You can't sit there and think, oh, when I've got courage, I'll be able to do this. You get courage by doing the things that make you fearful. But remember, we get so stuck up in here, you know, when we create such fearful and scary things, these 3D monsters, but once you turn around and face these 3D monsters, they just become two-dimensional cartoons.
Fantastic. One of the questions I always finish with, Dean, you know, we talk about self-mastery and using nutrition and mindset. Is there anyone that you'd recommend that I talk to on this topic that could impart some more to this conversation?
There's a few actually.
Okay. Well, if you think of them, then let me know.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we'll have a chat.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give you one straight away. Jeff Thompson.
Okay.
Jeff Thompson. I know he's come out of the wilds, if you like. He took a sabbatical for a while. He's brought a couple of books out last year, and he's writing another book right now. He's just wrote the foreword for my book. He's a good personal friend of mine, and he'll blow your mind. Fantastic.
Well, Dean, we'll have to do this again. Best of luck for the book launch and everything that will come with it. I'm sure it'll be a fun ride. Thanks again for your time. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.